So, how do we start this? How do
What are
we
we
kind of
talking about today?
Well, I thought we could talk about that post and just the motivation behind it, why did we put that out? What are we concerned about?
Yeah. What's that? Before we get started, what is that disorder that trans women have? What's it called?
AGP?
Yeah, AGP.
Only about
Uh,
75% of them.
Yeah, what is that? I mean, what's that name? How do you say that again? So I just don't want to say something stupid.
Autogynephilia.
Autogynephilia.
That's why I say
Autogynephilia.
AGP.
Word rolls off the tongue. Autogynephilia. Nope. Okay. Autogynephilia. Yeah, AGP.
So go ahead,
was,
Scott.
It was interesting reading that article because I really didn't know. I really have never, and maybe we can touch on this or not, but even as a trans, I never really understood why trans women were so focused on, making people believe that they're women, biological women. I got it now. Even after that blog, I was like, okay, I get that. That makes sense now. It's a sexual fantasy. You can't mess with their fantasy. So.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It only works when uninterrupted. What's up, Kenneth?
Well, anything that pierces that collapses the bubble, right? And then they have nothing to fall back on. They're just totally, completely, and utterly devastated. I've even tried to have a conversation and explaining that, like, I was a beautiful woman, right? Blonde hair, blue eyes, slim, 5'7", Norwegian, and trying to explain to them that women get called he all the time. It's no big deal. But for them, it just shattered everything. My friend would, when she was in college, she'd go home from the day. Somebody called me he. She'd go home and spend the rest of the day crying in bed. Like, it just totally shattered her world to be referred to as anything but she, her, or.
I don't know. I really kind of I've been struggling on trying to figure out why the whole insistence, and I think that's the reason why that blog did so well is because I understand it now and it makes perfect sense. There's two kinds of trans. There's one, I call it fetish trans now, and then people that want to be the opposite sex, and it makes perfect sense. But it's interesting that the fetish people, the people, it's clearly mental illness, are the ones that politicians are going, okay, what do we need to do? Trans women are women. Oh, okay.
It's not a mental illness. It's more closely aligned to a sexual orientation than anything else. It's basically inverted heterosexuality. So they are attracted to women, but much more so attracted to themselves as women. And it's just internalized heterosexuality. But it's when the external world has to participate in that fantasy. Yeah, is when we get into ethically gray areas, and the Morgaines and the lot of them do not want those questions asked, do not want a magnifying glass on what exactly their feelings and motivations are. That's why everything has to be just tucked under the label of gender identity. And it also explains why the conversion therapy conflation, because for them, undoing or trying to treat AGP cognitively is going to look exactly like trying to treat homosexuality cognitively. It won't work. Whereas it will for most of the rest of, or probably all the rest of causes of gender dysphoria. Because that's another thing to note with autogynephilia is it can create very severe and debilitating clinical gender dysphoria when what your brain is expecting is not reflected back. When you're, to be specific for a section and explicit for a second, when your brain is thinking, I should have a vagina, and a penis is there with an erection at the thought of having a vagina, that can cause severe, debilitating dysphoria. And usually that only happens, as far as I understand, much later in the age development of an AGP, we're talking middle age, and that's when a lot of them actually do physically transition. So I want to be I want to be very empathetic to that type of dysphoria, because it's very real, and as I've said, I think it's the most real and the most the least treatable. Yeah. Cognitively, and so the trans women out there who have AGP and are honest about what the cause is, and the fact that they are not women and they do not need to colonize women's spaces in order to get this 24/7 fantasy fulfilled, they have my utmost respect. But it's the ones who are shoveling this affirmation only transition children agenda to validate their orientation is what
Gotcha.
is unforgivable and unacceptable.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and 20 years ago, when there was a lot more assessment and psychotherapy prior to medically transitioning, they were talking about these different types of gender dysphoria and helping people to understand that, and I personally think that's why we saw fewer societal problems. Not just that there's more of us now, but that they used to be doing a lot more psychological preparatory work prior to transitioning to help people understand their condition and do it in a healthy way. And now they're just they're not giving people that information and helping people make sense of that, and they're just calling it all trans and starting people on hormones as fast as possible, and there's really no help for people to navigate things psychologically. And and I think, as with any sexual orientation, I mean, there are going to be people that have mental illness in addition to gender dysphoria, and I think that's why we're seeing young men in women's bathrooms taking pictures of themselves jerking off with like little girls and women in the background. Like, that kind of thing wasn't, to my knowledge, wasn't happening 20 years ago. I mean, that wouldn't have been tolerated, but I think people were also supported a lot better and screened a lot better.
Mhm.
Yeah, but the students got the keys to the classroom somewhere along the way is what happened, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and the whole narrative that anyone who wants to speak to the issue outside of their the trans radical advocate's stance on it is invalid or insignificant and should just be brushed aside, and it's not relevant to the discussion at hand. Like, after my hysterectomy, I received gender affirming care. The problem was that as part of that gender affirming care, I experienced a complication. And I don't talk about this because I find it embarrassing.
We're not.
The
Are
complication
we recording right now, by the way?
Yeah.
Oh, we are. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, the complication I experienced was a abscess. And I live with a history of childhood sexual exploitation. So the way I emotionally process pain is, it wasn't safe to feel pain or display pain. So I don't present pain well to medical professionals. The more severe the pain, the less I process it emotionally. So I had this abscess process going on for about 9 months after my hysterectomy. And by the time I was finally going to the emergency room, getting it dealt with, like, I walked into an emergency room in Vancouver in 2008, and in under 45 minutes, they were operating on me. And that was a time where the average waiting time in a hospital emergency room was 6 to 8 hours. So the abscess had gotten so bad that it was all the way from where my uterus used to be down to where my anus is. And I now have an anus, and within an inch of the anus, I have an open weeping fistula that's slowly closing, and I've had to deal with abscess processes from that because location. The gender affirming care didn't help me. Somebody should have done an internal vaginal exam to see what was going on, to see if it had anything to do with my hysterectomy, because it did. And that wasn't, they talk about Morgaine lists this 5% unhappy customers, but was I recorded in the 5%? Does anybody talk about the complications related to it? Like, this is a hysterectomy, right? This is a surgery that's commonly performed. The severity of the complication was in part due to doctors at that time being like literally afraid to address the female biology involved, because you had this, this is the same time where that one trans guy got onto was it the Georgia Strait who picked up his article because a doctor was concerned that the guy may be pregnant and may have an ectopic pregnancy because of the pain that he was presenting with. So the doctor insisted on performing a pregnancy test. And the guy was like, well, this was devastating to my emotional, psychological health and my gender identity because I had a pregnancy test done even though I was post-hysterectomy. Well, post-hysterectomy, you can still have eggs in there and, so it's a really dangerous narrative, right?
Yeah, tiptoe using this affirmative language and neglecting actual physical or bodily health.
Exactly.
Forsaking it too.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I was on the wait list for metoidioplasty for about 10 years, and then I was sent to Texas and had it done, and so from the time that I was put on the wait list, well, actually from the time that I started testosterone, so about I guess 15 years ago, until the time I was actually unconscious on the surgery table, nobody at any point in that 15-year period examined my anatomy to say whether or not I was a good candidate for that surgery or not. And when I woke up from the surgery, that's when I learned that I wasn't, in terms of just aesthetic outcomes. And I think that's because, they assume that we're all really embarrassed or that it's triggering of our dysphoria to ever look at our junk and do exams. But I would much rather that than end up having surgery that I wasn't a good candidate for.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't ever really talked about in the consultation with the surgeon or anything like that. So and the surgeon has never followed up with me to ask, like, are you happy with it? Like, there's been no survey.
Yeah, speaking to that, Aaron, I guess I want to clarify. I'm embarrassed about the anus issue.
Mm-hmm.
I have no problem with the vagina speak. It's like, how do you talk to people about the fact that, my problem is I've got a fistula within an inch of my anus and I live with the outcome of that.
Yeah.
That's my embarrassment is about the anus stuff. It's
Okay.
not about where the problem started. So yeah, speaking to what you're talking about the doctor, the failure to examine the situation, I just want to be really, I guess, clarify that part of the issue.
Mm-hmm. So going back to the post and, discussion about AGP. So in Scott, I'd love to hear a bit about the pushback you're getting from that too. But most of the comments that I'm seeing are saying, "Well, AGP doesn't exist. It's been a a debunked, unscientific theory." So it's different versions of that, right? That it doesn't exist. It's debunked theory. It's not scientific, and therefore, by bringing it up, you're just being transphobic.
Well, I think we probably need to start off the video with what has happened, because even though we know what's happened, people that are tuning in have no idea what happened. So I'll say it because I don't have nobody's trying to attack my career, so I'll do it. So there was a signature that both Aaron and I signed for Wolf, right? Kind of trying to protect women's rights or putting some boundaries around trans people. So Morgan Ogre, who is a trans radical, right? Basically did some really uncool things, trying to get Kim in trouble, going to the being a medical professional, outing his information online, just basically, bullying stuff, right? Stuff that trans radicals have always done. But me and Aaron are like, this isn't cool. This is not really cool. And so Aaron and I talked for a couple of weeks, and I've told this to him and many, many times. This is a big deal. I mean, this could be a turning point in this situation, but you need to be ready to take this on, because this is going to be a lot of stress. And it's kind of interesting that a couple of weeks ago, Aaron, we were saying, you know what, let's just let this go and go away. And then Morgan, of course, went to the press, and it was like, at that point, it was like, all right, okay, let's do this. And then the blog that you wrote about, Aaron, was so eye-opening to me, even as a trans person. I didn't understand. I have never understood why there's so much, foot cement. I'm not moving. I'm not a man. I'm a woman. I didn't understand that, and I understand it after that blog now, because it's creating that fantasy, right? Creating that fantasy. So having two different kinds of trans, like you say, Aaron, which is we have trans that want to be the opposite sex, feel more comfortable presenting the opposite sex. And you know what? There's synthetic hormones and surgeries to do so. It just needs to be safe, right? It just needs to be regulated. But it is what it is. It's cosmetic surgery, no different, I'm sorry, than a boob job. Boob jobs don't save lives, and neither does medical transition. It is a choice, in my opinion. But the other side of the trans is the women or the trans women, the men who get, turned on by thinking that they are a woman having sex with a woman. So it's just like, it's stuff that people don't even want to think about that, right? That's like, I don't care what your sexual orientation is, what turns you on, go for it. Shut the door. As long as, nobody gets hurt and, all that type of stuff, it's fine. But what I found interesting after reading that, and then following up with all the significant trans women that have basically screamed so loud, they all have this AGP. And it makes sense to me now why they're fighting so hard. What doesn't make sense to me, and what just absolutely bewilders me, is that we have society sitting back going, yeah, trans women are women. They really are. You're an asshole. And, this kind of stuff. And the fact that kids at 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 12 years old, they are able to go, yeah, I was born in the wrong body. And nobody can prove it with biological studies. Nobody can, tell you what the long-term success of it is. Nobody can tell you what happens to puberty blockers. They don't even want to do studies on, puberty blockers, although it's a hugely dangerous drug. But then we have society that's sitting in the background, watching the headline news, seeing, trans women are women. They're like, yeah, Steve, trans women are women. They really are. And all this stuff is happening. And then I realized this week that this is the only people that are out. These are the only people that are talking. And even as trans, 2.5 years ago, when I started to talk about trans, I was kind of like, war shocked. Like, I don't think trans women are women. And then they were, yeah, me neither. I'm like, what? And so this is an opportunity, I think, that, in my opinion, Ogre is about the biggest imbecile I've ever met in my life. Has no strategic anything. I mean, she has just actually put her neck out big time. And with the response that you have from this, and with the response that we have with Trey Voices and people coming forward, this is going to get louder and louder and louder. So here is where my loving side comes in. These people that do have ADP, they are going to be, they're going to be shell shocked when this comes out. When society figures out what they've been saying yes to, what they have been kind of manipulated to do, they're going to be pissed
We've
off.
sacrificed children to.
Yeah, they are going to be so fucking pissed off at us. Pissed off. And then they have every right to be. But these women, and I'm sorry, I don't know, I'm not an expert on it, but it seems like absolute mental illness to me, Aaron, Terrell. It does to me, but I'm going to step back from that. But I think that these trans women are going to be thrown for a loop. I really do. So that's all I have to say.
I'll just say I don't think any of us have the capacity to understand the power of male sexuality, and that's what most of this is fueled by. So yeah.
I have a story that I told. I'm writing a memoir, and part of the memoir was after I started taking testosterone. You guys could probably key in on this too. I started to notice in the sky that there were breasts everywhere. I was like, oh. And I would go, babe, look, there's a nipple and a breast right there. And she'd be like, what? No, I'm serious. It's right there. I need to call the weather people because this is a phenomenon. I've got to let people know. And I started to realize as I was, walking around, I'm like, oh God, did you see that thing in the sand? That's a breast. It is. I'm serious. Look at that. But that is a breast. And just everything was like sexual to me. It was like, she'd go, well, what do you want to have dinner tonight? I'd be like, sex. Pizza. And so
Tortellini looks remarkably like vaginas.
I know, right? So the thing about having both testosterone-driven body and estrogen-driven body is that I never understood before I transitioned how powerful male sexuality is. I don't know what it is on top of being a biological male with testosterone, but I'll tell you, my situations is much, much sharper with my kids and anybody that I love, because I realized the space between somebody that actually takes sex because they want it and somebody that's consensual. With males, it's a lot smaller than what I thought. It's dangerous. I remember there was a couple of months where I was like, holy shit, I need to tell people that men are really sexual. I need to tell somebody. It was a revelation for me.
Because nobody knew that.
This is nuts. I mean, I would walk in the house and go, I'm so fucking tired. I'm thinking about sex. Oh my God.
You know what? You're bringing up such a valid point in what we're talking about, because we have two X chromosomes. And I've never heard this talked about when I was involved in the Trans Health BC, because that's what it was called then. But two X chromosomes. The X chromosome carries the sex characteristics. The X chromosome responds to the testosterone. Men have one X chromosome. So you can take everything about testosterone. For trans guys, it's doubled. Okay, it explains why do trans guys get facial hair growth? Like, I've got double the facial hair growth of any of my brothers, and I've also got double the male pattern balding.
Yeah.
Because I have two X chromosomes. Biology matters. Biology matters to the discussion. Biology, and what you're talking about is exactly. So our response to testosterone
It's different.
is twice that. Is twice the impact, and it's the sudden change impact too, because we go from levels A to almost male normal in 2.5 seconds. So
Yeah.
that's a fabulous example, Scott, and Thank you for articulating it so clearly, and I just got to read what it's telling me I have to do
You
here.
know, and so
And I just wanted to make obvious that I'm parked.
good,
If
good.
when I was doing that, I just obvious I'm parked during this conversation because I imagine Morgan will eventually be coming after me. I'm looking forward to coming after my woman.
You're frozen. You're frozen, Ken. Oh, there you go.
hope,
You're back.
I hope someday we get to talk about stuff like that, because I think there's a lot that can be learned from being on separate hormones. And you guys know probably, and I'd be surprised if none of you disagree, or if any of you disagreed with me, but the way that you think is completely different on hormones from one hormone to another. It does change things. So there is a change that happens when you do take synthetic hormones. There's absolutely a change. I mean, there's a change in how you deal with problems, how you tackle things. I mean, we're talking about sex because it's funny. It goes from, before transition, as a lesbian, I was like, oh God, let's make out for like hours and hours and hours and just light candles and just, let's do massages. Let's do massages. And then after, I was like, I'm done. I've been kissing for like 30 seconds. Let's get to it. And so there's things that I understand now that I didn't understand before. And I find myself at times, if I'm talking to a friend that's here, let me put my light back down. Hold on. That's a woman or something. And she'll go, yeah, my husband and I aren't getting along or this and that. I'm like, are you giving him sex? I mean, it's the first thing that I go to. I would have never said that before I transitioned. The importance of it, the difference, relating as a human being from on testosterone to on estrogen is completely different. I wish we could get to the point where we could talk about that. So I think we could fix some things. We're definitely not men, but don't you think differently, guys? I mean, seriously?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think when that testosterone impacted my sexuality quite substantially, and on one hand, it gave me better insight into how men behave around sex and how they approach it. At the same time as so when I had that understanding, I gained a little bit of empathy, but then I also got real pissed off when I understood previous behaviors.
Yeah.
Like so it's like on one hand, it's like, okay, I get this, and then it's like, oh wait, but yeah, so that's a double-edged sword there. But we do have a very, very unique experience in that.
We do. We really do.
Mhm.
Yeah, that we kind of see
And it
both sides of
ties
this.
into what's happening, right? It ties into brilliant fucking blog, by the way, Aaron. That is, I wish I would have wrote that because that was fucking awesome. But it weaves in kind of what's happening right now, right? Because we have biological males who do not want to have their fantasy taken away. So much so, and I've talked to trans women, and I know you have too, Aaron. I'm not going to say who, but you have talked to trans women. I have talked to trans women who are, out there going, trans women are women, but you get them alone and you can get them to say, yeah, I know, but it's like it gets them off. And the scary thing to me is how easily human beings can be manipulated to believe anything. If you cannot tie that to what's going on right now, we have men that have erotic fetishes right now that are directing politicians. They are directing pharmacology. They are directing our schools. They are directing the LGBT. We are turning into the biggest sexual organization in the world. We are promoting. People are driving their pink Cadillacs, of transgenderism and gay people. And we've stopped being a soft place to fall. We are a Mary Kay recruiting agency, and why is that happening? Why is that happening? I'll tell you why it's
Because
happening.
heterosexual men took it over.
Because of men's sexuality. Period. Is why that's happening.
I've heard of some of them when they, and they fully admit that this was about sexuality, and then they start the hormones and get the surgery, and their sex drive diminishes, and then it's like, oh well, now this doesn't really work for me because now I don't have the high testosterone levels that are driving my sex drive, and then they're disappointed because, well, now, because I did this as a sexual fantasy and because it really turns me on, and now I don't have a sex drive because I'm on estrogen and I don't have balls anymore.
The interesting thing to me is obviously the estrogen comes first. So they're the testosterone drops significantly with just the hormonal transition. But we have to remember, like, it's not a fetish, it's an orientation. So no matter how much your sexual, like your testosterone, will ebb or flow, your sexual orientation for most people is going to stay the same. So when the hormones,
You're sitting, Aaron.
I know. But again, this is something that I think is specific to females. I think male sexuality is much more of a straight line, much more inflexible. But so with AGP transition, they start taking hormones. And remember, most of these people are fed the lie that that feeling aroused at the idea of being a woman means that they are women. So many of these young men who are indoctrinated into this believe the propaganda they're fed. They don't, especially when the other side's saying it's a perverted fetish. Obviously, you're going to go, no, that's not me. That's not what I have. This is, I have a woman's brain. I feel this way because I have a woman's brain. So then they start taking the cross-sex hormones. Their sex drive dramatically diminishes, but their orientation remains the same, which is themselves as a woman. So no matter how long that, and a lot of them have a lot of dysphoria around erections, right? So they're going to actually be quite relieved at the decreased sex drive. And it's, again, further validation that they are real women. And then the tragic part, though, is along this whole way, if they get to the point of actual sexual reassignment surgery and orchiectomy, at that point, it's done. The full realization sets in, unless, except in certain cases where the AGP, and this is mostly just me reading, and there's limited studies in this regard, but what seems to happen is only in the cases of severe debilitating dysphoria at the genital region does SRS actually help and relieve that. And so they're just so relieved to be rid of their dick and balls that they just, it's not a regret, because that dysphoria maintained all along. But for the vast majority, it seems that it's debilitating regret after SRS because the primary drive to have a vagina is removed with their testicles. So it's again, just they are oftentimes victims of this industry as much as, well, they're certainly mostly the perpetrators of it, but also many of them are falling victim as well. Because if we don't understand what autogynephilia is, and we're just lobbing off testicles of young men, it's like that's criminal. Like, yeah.
You guys ever? I mean, if you really sit back and think about it, we're mutilating a generation of kids so that men can have some sexual fetishes. And when did we always get involved in anybody else's sexual? Aaron, Terrell, Aaron, and Kenneth, I think you guys are great, but I don't care what turns you on. I don't give a fuck. I don't.
Well,
and
you said you wanted to be a lesbian.
I don't want to see your fucking flag. I don't.
But that's the thing. That's the thing, Scott, is nobody does. Yeah. Nobody wants to know those details. Yeah. Nobody wants to know the sexual component of this. And it's very easy to therefore tuck it under gender identity, because that's really palatable and mass consumable.
Tuck it under. No.
Well, and in Canada, I've been watching guys talking on YouTube now about trans issues and trans stuff, and like, I had to go to a gynecologist, and I had to go and I see a endocrinologist, and my endocrinologist has had long talks with me about how testosterone changes my emotional landscape.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, totally.
And what considerations, like I'm now I have no gonads, I'm hypothyroid, and I'm diabetic. So nutritional supplements make huge differences in the outcomes for diabetics. long-term health benefits. So he's talked to me about how do I take into account the fact that I'm on a synthetic testosterone in managing my diabetes, and how does that affect the supplements I look at taking, the levels I look at taking, and stuff like that. And I'm not going to get into the specifics of that because that's between me and my doctor. But to find out that, like in Canada, the CPATH is seeking to eliminate endocrinologists from the whole process, and the effects that decision is having on people going, I don't know. You know, how do I decide what supplements to take because I'm on testosterone? How do I decide what supplements to take because I'm on estrogen? I don't know. And it's like, wow.
Kind of like, yeah,
And
kind of hammers on with that, doesn't it?
well, yeah, and you know, talking the same thing. Being in a estrogen enriched environment, how I access sexual release is very different from how I access or experience sexual release in a testosterone enriched environment. It's totally changed the whole pathway to and the experience of. And yeah, my doctor talked to, you know, when I asked him about it, he explained it to me. Like, this is how, you know, this is how this hormone and this hormone affect your brain. And if you want to find out more, go to these areas of male sexuality, testosterone, female sexuality, estrogen, and you can, you know, find out a little bit about what's known about that. But
You know, I also think that we kind of cling to the idea that biology is wrong. And I think we all kind of went through that. I remember when I started to transition, it felt really good for me to think that it wasn't a choice I had to make, that it was just I was righting a wrong. I was born in the wrong body, and so it was easier to take that testosterone, right? And of course, it forces everybody, the insurance and the governments, to pay for it. And it's kind of a relief. It's almost like, hey, you know what? Whew, so I got a prescription. We're going to be good, kind of a thing. And so when you get, and you guys probably have gone through this too, is when you get misgendered from your whatever. I mean, if somebody calls you she or Kenneth or Aaron, it doesn't make me feel good. It makes me feel like I'm a terrible actress. You know, it makes me feel stupid. And I don't like that feeling. And I think that that's one of the reasons why I was a little testy. But then I started to think, you know, that's not fair, but it hurts my feelings. And I had something happen to me at work. I was talking to a client. He's a fucking dick. I hate him. He's a dick. But he's one of my customers. And so I can't tell him that he's a fucking dick. But anyways, I was on the phone with him, and he was trying to get something or trying to out talk me or whatever. And I said, no. And he goes, listen, you fucking faggot. And I went, my voice, you know, I'm a trans woman, and it hurt my feelings. He thinks I'm a faggot, which is, you know, who cares? But it's just like, you know, that it's in the core. Like, what's okay? I'm not doing man good enough, or, you know, or whatever. I don't mean to hurt anybody's feelings, but it hurt my feelings. But instead of coming back and telling him he's a dick, I went, well, Tom, what makes you think that I want to help you more now because of that, you asshole? I said, you know, we got to get this figured out. He started laughing, and of course we went on. That's another thing that men do, is they just like get over that kind of stuff. But it hurt my feelings. You know, it really did hurt my feelings. I didn't let him know it. You know, I kind of laughed it off like I did, and he's a jerk. We went on with it, and, you know, I sold him, but it hurt my feelings. So it's interesting that what we're doing to kids and what we're selling has to do with not hurting people's feelings and making sure that men have their sexual desires met.
mm-hmm.
That's why we're at the place that we're at right now.
I wonder
And
too how
society's
much of
taking
it.
that going, this is so brave. This 4-year-old right here, yeah, trans, yeah, actually a girl. Isn't that amazing? Yeah, the mom's got a book right there. Yeah, it's $2,000. You can buy a book though. Yep, that's what's happening. It's nuts.
I wonder how much of it for those with AGP, like, I mean, A, do they know that that's what's going on for them? So, I mean,
Most don't.
most don't, right? And because that's not what they're being told anymore.
Right.
That was part of the normal part of the transcare landscape 20 years ago. But it's not anymore. I was, when I transitioned, I was right at the very beginning of when all that changed. So Kenneth, you probably were too. During that transition, right, where a decision was made that we're going to change direction and we're going to do this differently. Regardless of what type of gender dysphoria we have, whether it's the homosexual subtype or EGP, I mean, none of us are being told that's what's going on for us. So I think for a lot of these kids, it's probably a very confusing experience. It's probably a very, like, if let's say it's emerging in a 13-year-old, or like, let's not always characterize this as creepy men, right? Middle-aged creepy men in women's bathrooms. I mean, sometimes these are children, that are confused, they're scared, they don't know what's going on for them. I imagine there's a lot of shame around that too. And what 13-year-old, or I mean, what middle-aged man for that matter, who wants to have a conversation with their doctor about, hey, I'm getting erections when I think of myself as having a vagina? Like, I imagine that's a very humiliating conversation to have. So I don't want to always characterize it as you're just some pervert that, I think I want to try to have empathy too.
As Ray Blanchard says, no man would choose this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also it's if you want to have that kind of fantasy, that's cool. Have it in your bedroom. I don't care if you're into feet or, brushing somebody's hair, or I don't care, massaging a pinky really turns you on. Go for it. I just don't want to know about it. And I don't want it to affect my children. And I don't want you talking about it in schools. And I don't want you medically transitioning a generation of kids.
I want to jump in there because I think it's important to know that it's not a fetish as much as it is an orientation. So I think a lot of times when people talk about AGP, it sounds very much like how people talked about homosexuality 50 years ago. It's like, I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to know about it. Don't teach my kids about it. And that's how, delinquent behavior happens in these, not delinquent, but like bad behavior is facilitated when we say this is just a dirty private thing some rare adults do. Don't tell anybody about it. What I want to do is talk about how actually very common autogynephilia is, and how it shouldn't be shamed, but it 100% should not be validated as real womanhood. Like, we need to know what it is, and we need to be empathetic to those, because again, it is a sexual orientation, and no one, just like nobody chooses to be gay, nobody chooses to have autogynephilia. It's actually so much more inconvenient and so much more stigmatized, and it causes oftentimes severe dysphoria. So I think it's important to really recognize that this isn't just like it's not the same as like, jerking off to touch and toes or whatever. It is inverted heterosexuality, and most people with it have no idea that's what they have. They think they have a woman's brain, which is what society at large is telling them right now. So
that makes sense. I can agree with that. But there is a fine line, right? There's a fine line. When
it infringes on women's space, is that, well, there's a lot of lines, but that's the big one.
When it's being sold, unfortunately. Yes. And I'm a firm believer. I got something on, I tweeted out, basically somebody said something about the LGBT, and it's true. In my house, I've blocked the LGBTQ from all devices. You can't get on LGBTQ. They've gone too far. They've stepped over the boundaries. They have gone from, soft place to fall to, they're out recruiting. And I don't want that. And I understand what you're saying, Aaron, about AGP. I get that. But it's none of anybody's business. Don't talk to my kids about it. Don't act like it's some kind of celebration. Like there's some kind of celebration for, being gay or having this or having that. It's, what? It is what it is. It's a soft place to fall. You deserve all the rights. I deserve all the rights of everybody else. But don't try to validate yourself by talking everybody else into it. Don't go after kids, and stop talking about sexuality in schools. Stop it.
Mhm.
I mean, if that happened to one of my kids, I think you guys know me well enough. I'd be on the fucking news. They'd be like, trans man walks into school and beats up teacher for talking about, promoting queer life or whatever. And I'm a lesbian that transitioned. We've crossed boundaries. So I get what you're saying, Aaron. But my question is this: how do we create some kind of balance? And I say this to everything that's an ideology or something that cannot be proved. I say that to religion. How can we create a fine line of, delusional thinking, that there's a gray man in the sky, to allowing them to do that, and it goes over on this side. So where's the line? Where's the line?
Well, one of the lines. Go ahead, Kenneth.
Yeah, I like what I'm seeing on Twitter, and I don't know where it originated, but it's the idea that real inclusion is celebrating boys and girls for being boys and girls, however they wish to express that. But it's celebrating a boy being a boy, masculine, feminine, somewhere in between, moving between the two. But he's a boy, and we're celebrating his boyhood, however he wishes to take that into his manhood. And the girl, well, we celebrate her girlhood. Butch girl, femme girl, halfway in between girl. I'm going to wear a flannel shirt and a pink skirt, however she wants to be that. But let's celebrate girls and boys for being girls and boys. And the danger of that narrative is then, would medical transitioning in 15 years even be necessary if we celebrated children for being children and allowed them the space to just be?
Mm-hmm.
I hope you still have your thought, Aaron.
One of the lines, just going back to what Scott was saying about, there's these lines. One of the lines that I've been thinking about is, we don't want to shame AGP in itself, right? Because people say, well, by talking about these different diagnostic categories that we're pathologizing this, and that's not my intent. So by drawing attention to this, it's just because I think there's power in information. Like, we can solve problems with information. And so it's not that so the line for me is that AGP in itself, I think we need to destigmatize. If we want people to step forward and say, hey, I have this, let's problem solve, then we can't shame them, right? Because shame drives things underground. So we need... So we want people to be able to talk openly and accept, okay, I've got AGP, to recognize that, so that we can problem solve. Because the problem is, we don't include people who haven't consented in your sexual fantasy, because that's gross. Don't invade private spaces without consent, because that's gross. So it's the way that AGP is being played out in society, because we haven't had a really honest and responsible conversation about it, that these problems are having. So it's the fine line is, how do you call out problematic behaviors and harmful behaviors and how this is playing out in society without driving AGP in itself, back into the closet in a shameful kind of way, because that's not helpful either.
Education. We do it by the problem is I think a lot of male default is being quite secretive about sex, and it's not something I've totally worked out yet. But we need to understand that an autogynephile is just it's a heterosexual male with an inverted heterosexuality, right? And so their specific form of heterosexuality is right now either stigmatized vehemently as a perversion and a fetish. So if you're a early teenage boy who has this orientation, and you're hearing either you're a perverted fetishist who is going to basically lurk on women in the changing rooms, or you're a real beautiful woman, the most marginalized and also most incredible and glamorous of all women. Of course, any boy is going to choose, the latter. same thing though is happening with adults who are approaching this, because you got a lot of right now we've got a lot of men in their 40s coming out as women, as lesbians, because they have kept this secret, this deep secret, all their lives, and now suddenly that deep shameful secret that they already always had means that they're just a trans woman. They're a beautiful trans woman. And not just that, they're no longer a dangerous heterosexual, usually white man. They are a trans lesbian, and how beautiful and wonderful is that? And suddenly they have all this external validation for something which was a deep dark secret all their life, and the only way, the problem is I'm also learning is that men, regardless of whether or not they identify as women or not, are not at all comfortable with talking about publicly about sexuality. That's not a rule by and large, but generally speaking, and certainly autogynephiles are not. Obviously, we've got plenty on our side who are very much open about what they have and what that means, but by and large, there's going to be so much pushback about what we're trying to do, educating and throwing the light on this, that it's going to get bad, because people are going to fight for their lives to be women. Like, I don't mean literally, like there's going to be like battles, like physical battles, but you know what I mean? Like this is not going to be given up. Like
It's a little bit like the fight that those of us with teenage kids, like who are into video games and stuff. How does reality compete with the wonderful world of video games, where it's colorful and it's these graphics, and the reward system is so immediate, and the immediate gratification of that? How does reality become appealing to somebody who, what am I trying to say? It's a hard sell, right? When the fantasy is so much more exciting and cooler and an easier sell than reality is.
Yeah, but it's just, in both cases, it's so damaging to mental health. I think a slow detox is the only answer. Just like with any, they're both really, AGP, or getting that external validation as a woman, and like the video game fantasy world. They're both they're kind of addictive behaviors, and like because again that reward system, I imagine. I guess the only answer I can come up with is a very slow, subtle detoxification from that, rather than a cold turkey. But what that means in regards to actual autogynephilia, I'm spitballing here. Sorry, anybody else pick up the baton?
You know what? There's a point at which women's voices need to be heard. I was at the CPAP conference. Sorry. No. Women's voices. I mean, me. I am a trans man, and by definition, trans men are women, right?
Yeah. Sorry, I threw in a joke there, interjectedly.
He was doing it funny.
I got it totally, and it's a great point of clarification. So in a way, thank you. I was at the CPATH conference held in Vancouver a couple years back, and repeatedly at that conference, they were like, we're starting this committee on this issue, and we've already got 2 F to M's. So for the other 10 positions, we're going to amplify women's voices. Okay, we're starting this special committee on issue B, and we've got 1 F to M. So for the other 5 positions, we're seeking to amplify women's voices. So trans men's voices, women, are being silenced in the professional organization. CPATH, who's supposed to be the big umbrella on these issues, we're being silenced at that level. And I don't even know now if they'd let me go to another conference. Like if there was another CPATH conference in Canada and they saw my name there, I don't even know that they'd let me attend, because of, speaking the unutterable publicly, right?
You're doing what Eric, we're all doing, which is, what is it, advocating to harm the LGBT community?
They're doing that all on their own. It's interesting that there seems to be a double standard, right? I think the most hilarious thing, I've made a conscious decision this week. Every trans woman, Morgan, anybody that says something to me, I just snap back, call them assholes, dipshits, whatever. You know, I call them names. I've been doing everything that they've been doing to women for years now. And all of a sudden I'm a misogynist asshole. Well, you know what? I kind of am acting like one. I'm acting like you. I'm mirroring. I'm mirroring what you guys have done to women. So what I don't understand is if they want to be women so fucking bad, then start acting like it. You know, start acting like it. And to basically say the way that I've been, you know, reacting to them, that's exactly how you have treated women that are trying to protect their children. This is how you've been treating them. And all of a sudden I'm the bully. How does that happen? You know, how is it that you do it and you're not a bully? You know, Morgan Oak is a perfect example. She's never said a fucking thing that makes any sense. You cannot pin that, you know, Morgan into are you a man or a woman? Oh, you're a woman. Okay. How did that happen? When did that happen? And tell me what did it? What medication did it? What surgery did it? What changed biology? She won't talk about that at anything. And anytime you say anything to her, the first thing she does is bigot, transphobe. And it's like, okay, I'm done. My work's done. My work's done.
That's how this has been propagated so long. Is that when you start to shed light, which is what we're all trying to do, shed light on the various types of dysphoria and trans, like what leads somebody to a trans identification. When you start to kind of pick at what that is, it's immediately shut down as work of transphobic bigots. Only a transphobic bigot would ask questions about what causes dysphoria. Why is that? Because we're trying to hide AGP under this, you know? So it's the same from all of them. Again, except, you know, a select wonderful few.
It's embarrassing. I get that from a empathy standpoint. Being a male and being turned on by the idea of being a woman, having sex with a woman. Hold on, let me catch up. Okay, I'm there. That's got to be embarrassing. You know, it's embarrassing that I feel more comfortable, you know, as a male. My personality is like all male. Could you imagine what I would have been like if I had the same personality and I was born a male? I mean, I'd have been the biggest asshole in the entire world. I mean, I'm misogynistic. You wouldn't be even touch me. I would be horrible. But it's our experiences, right? That make us who we are. So it's nuts to me. After reading that blog, Aaron, and I usually don't read things all together. I read a whole bunch on medical transition when I was, you know, trying to save my life. But other than that, I have, you know, the staying power of a fucking gnat. So I start reading stuff and I'm like, oh, everything. Well, I read that whole thing a couple of times because it was just like, bing, 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 bing. I get it now. So anyways, I have no idea what I was talking about. Anyways.
I really
no
think,
medically
you know,
transition kids. Okay.
You know, because I mean, Kenneth, you can probably speak to this even more than I could because you entered into this before I did. But I do think because I remember that transition happening, not my transition, but our transition and thinking about this, I remember that happening because I was there. And I remember reading some of the, you know, because we've talked about this before, that Vancouver is quite a hot spot for this stuff. And some really good work in trans care was happening in Vancouver, you know, 20 years ago, roughly. And I knew some of those clinicians, fantastic people. I still have great things to say about the physician that saw me, and I will never go after her because it's not her fault that she, you know, it's the whole system decided to go in this direction, right? So you can't point at any individual clinician and say, well, you're at fault for this. And they meant to do the right thing.
I agree with you.
And there were some really fantastic essays being published, you know, in the 90s and even into the early 2000s. Really great psychiatrist in Vancouver wrote a paper about a couple of case studies, and one of the case studies was somebody with AGP and talking about, you know, working with that individual through psychotherapy and how that individual was able to integrate, you know, AGP into an identity for themselves that was healthy. And I if I'm remembering correctly, that individual didn't end up taking on a trans identity and didn't transition. So this was part of that work, or essays from that same clinic, talking about how how gender dysphoria can kind of fracture our identities. It can be quite disintegrating for us emotionally and psychologically, and talking about the therapeutic work they were doing to help people integrate psychologically again. So I mean, really, really smart things coming out of Vancouver around that time, and I think that's why we weren't seeing all these societal problems, because people were really well supported. And now we call that gatekeeping. And I think that's such a ludicrous way of thinking about it, because it's not just about no, 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 you can't be who you want to be. It's about supporting us psychologically through that process, so that even if we do end up transitioning medically, we're doing it in the healthiest way possible. And that, I feel like, is completely missing from the system now. We're not being given information to help make sense of our experience, and we're not being well supported to make that transition in a way that we can actually function well in the society respectfully. And I also, like, that's been my frustration, is this isn't a sexual fetish for me. I just want to get on with my life and integrate into society and do well in society, value my community. And there was no support for that, like to re-socialize and to navigate all the weirdness of this. We're kind of left on our own to do all of that, and with maybe some peer support, but it's like the blind leading the blind. We're all fumbling through this, and it's painful and confusing. And so where is the support for all of that? And so my motivation for talking about this isn't for me. This isn't for my health. I mean, I would rather not have the stress of all of this and just get on with my life as I have been doing for the last 15 years. But what about the kids? Like, I'm concerned about the outcome for these young people coming through our offices at a very high rate, and who aren't being well supported. They're not being given evidence-based information about what's going on for them. They're not being helped psychologically to navigate that. And then when they encounter weirdness out there in their lives as they try to fumble their way through this, they're not being well supported. And
Yes.
so
yes.
I don't,
Good.
it's easy to kind of point at the trans people that aren't doing well and are behaving inappropriately and saying, you're an asshole, but where was the support for them to do that well?
You're absolutely right. But here's the thing. Those are the only people that the media is talking to. That's
Yes.
the only people. I mean, think about this. Morgan, who outed where you worked, is trying to, and has the media at attention, has been on how many different things. We have no media attention, none. But we're the majority of trans. We're the majority.
Yes.
And here's the fact. When society figures out what's happening, because I think it was you, Aaron Terrell, that said this, that people are not being malicious. Society is not being malicious. I don't think the medical industry, most of them, are not being malicious. I think that they think that they're being loving and doing something right.
Mhm.
I do. And so when somebody realizes that they have been used or manipulated, and that using and manipulating is tying to an innocent part of our society, which is our children, you've got to be crazy if you don't think people are going to fucking hate us. They're going to hate us. And we have got to stand up as trans people and let people know that this crazy motherfucker does not represent us. We have to.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, the majority of
I am not represented by a trans woman who goes into a woman's bathroom, digs through the garbage can for used sanitary products, and masturbates in the bathroom when she puts one of those used sanitary products in her underpants. That does not represent me, and I've seen that on Twitter.
Mhm.
Like, that's not me. That's not who I am. That's not why I adopted a masculinized social gender presentation. And I think that, like you said, for the vast majority of the population of people who experience gender dysphoria, transition or don't transition, those people do not represent us. and they should not be. That is presently the population, AGP, that is driving advocacy. That is presently the population whose voices are being amplified in Canada by the organization of professionals that is speaking to be advocates, because that is the policy of CPATH in Canada. We are amplifying women's voices. They invite trans men to please remain silent on the issue because we already have one or two of you here, and we're amplifying women's voices. So yes, and how you get to the path you take to get to where you are matters, right? I'm a professional truck driver. So when I had my truck driving school, they asked us on the first day of school to share a little bit, like we all got 5 minutes, our background on what got us to being here to take the class so you could get your Class 1 license. And my background was in university, college, criminology, psychology, my studying. So I didn't have any experience with driving truck. So during the 4 weeks of class, they focused on teaching me a lot about the mechanics of driving a truck. This is the engine. Connected to the engine is the starter. This is where you check the oil. This is where you check the antifreeze. This is where the air conditioner is. These are the belts that drive the engine. These pulleys connect to this. These pulleys connect to that. You got to check this. So they made sure I had a really firm grasp of the mechanics of what would become my profession. Right? So the background mattered. Other guys, we had a guy there who was a small car mechanic. He didn't have formal training as a mechanic, but he'd worked as a technician repairing small cars in his uncle's or whatever shop. So they didn't spend a lot of time with him on, what is an engine, what is a brake, what is a, because he had all that background information already. So they spent time with him on a whole bunch of other parts about truck driving. So how you get to where you are matters. And it's relevant to good health care to ask. And in the affirmations model, they don't ask, and I was in one of the talks at the CPATH conference, and the doctor who was talking said, quote, "I find that the younger trans people who are coming to me for to be started on hormones have already Googled all this." Because we know how good of a source Google and chat groups and YouTube is for medical information.
Well, Reddit is the leading organization for medical studies for transgender people. I don't know if you know that, but if you need to know anything about transgender health or transgenderism or queer theory or anything, I mean, they have a new, it's Reddit, medical studies. Fuck you, we're right. You got to look it up. It's a great site.
Okay, yeah, we should put the link down here if you can, Aaron, for that. I think that'd be great for people.
Do you know how many people have replied with like a Reddit things that I've asked? It is hilarious. There's got to be a skit there somewhere. I mean, it's just like, no, Reddit's not a medical. No. And then they send me studies that are like, okay, this study. I'm like, oh, you mean that one that was retracted at this date at that time? Okay. No, oh, that one too. You got another one? No, Reddit doesn't count. But society's not hearing any of this. I mean,
No.
it's nuts. They think Reddit said so.
Oh, so Reddit is not a good source.
No, he was being sarcastic.
I missed that. I missed the sarcasm. Oh, that's where people are going to get the affirmations stuff that everybody's going on.
Yeah, the Ask Reddit forums. Just go on Reddit and ask questions. You're going to get the best quality information possible.
I've gotten kicked off of Reddit.
The answer is always
I'm
you're
up to
definitely
50
trans.
times now. Yeah, 50
Oh,
times.
yeah. because the peer support stuff that I was required to access to so you get your X chromosome from your mother, and he was talking to FTAMS, and it was, so you get your X chromosome from your mother, and if you're wanting to know what genetics is going to go on regarding your transition, then you look at your maternal line and you check out the genetics on that side, and that's how you're going to know what's going to happen with your body regarding testosterone. So that was the peer support counseling we were getting.
Yeah.
There was no,
You need
you're
to
a
go to
trans
Reddit.
man, so you have 2 X chromosomes. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah,
You
peer
just need,
support
all this
sucks.
confusion can be taken away by an afternoon on Reddit.
Yeah, and you know what? And that whole line that we've been getting, in a little bit of the backlash from this is, well, AGP was long debunked and it's not scientific. Well, actually, the quality of research that was being done by the psychologists and ongoing, they're still around. Very, very sophisticated, high quality psychological studies. So, the idea that this isn't in any way scientific is total BS. I mean, those
And there's
studies are
nothing to
there.
replace it anyway.
Exactly. So when something is, when you're thinking like a clinician or a scientist, something isn't debunked unless there is new evidence that disproves the old evidence, and no one has ever disproved Blanchard's
Or come up with
research.
any alternative. It's other than just calling everything gender identity. It's just well, it's not debunked if you just push it under the rug and look at this rug, this beautiful gender identity rug is what. Yeah.
Isn't it nuts how naive everybody is being? I mean, it's actually it's nuts. I mean, take WPATH, right? I mean, we've talked about this before, Aaron. The Guide for Transgender Health that has never held up in a court of law anywhere. It's never held up. Oh yeah, that doesn't work. But that's the one that when kids take their parents take these kids in, they want to kill themselves, and they got all the information on Reddit, so they're very well informed on everything. The doctor goes, oh no. Puberty blockers are reversible. Are they? How do you know? They've never been studied for medically transitioned kids. I don't know that, but I can give you a whole handful of 20-year-olds that have size of lungs of a 12-year-old because they pause puberty. They're having a hard time. You might want to talk to them. They're throwing this down and go, yes, this is transgender health. But they're not telling them the truth. This won't hold up in court. You're going to sign a little piece of paper right here, and basically what it says is, we don't know what the fuck we're doing. And if your child gets hurt, sorry. Okay, so go ahead and sign right there. Do you have your insurance card? Or whatever. And that's the truth. That is the absolute truth. That there's no studies. We have no clue what's going to happen to these kids. Not one.
And people have been saying, like, again, like the backlash that we sometimes get when we talk about this stuff is, well, WPATH says this, WPATH says this. I mean, they're the experts, and this is based on science. But I don't know if you noticed, but WPATH, they're about to publish their next version, so version 8. And so they've now created a part of their website to start unrolling that and give us some sneak peeks and stuff. And they made a statement on there that said this version of the WPATH standards of care is the first version ever to use an evidence-based approach.
Bullshit.
Well, no,
I
that's
can't
got to
wait
be
to see
blowing
that.
people's minds. And if anybody
And
actually
yet
approaches that,
we've been told time and time again, you're being transphobic assholes by saying that WPATH isn't scientific. Well, they just announced to the entire world that this is the first time that they've used an evidence-based approach and are really doing a what they call a systematic review of the evidence. So that's a pretty. I'm actually surprised that they admit that.
so was I. Like, how do you,
Yes, they did.
what you just said is the previous seven installments.
We were kidding.
Yeah, it was just swinging from the hip all along.
It was expert opinion is what it was based on. Because if you look at the references at the back of the version 7, there's pages of it, but most of it is is position statements and expert opinion by WPATH members that was published in WPATH's own journal. Is
Right.
what most of the things in the reference are.
See, I think that one of the ways that this is going to get stopped is people need to get sued, and I think the first people that need to be sued, honestly, I think it's WPATH all the way through and through and through and through and through, through and through. I mean, if parents knew, okay, parents pretend that you are at a doctor's office and I'm the doctor, and I just threw down WPATH and go, okay, this is WPATH. It's transgender healthcare. It's full of at doctor's discretions. We do not have any studies on puberty blockers. We have no idea of long-term studies on synthetic hormones. We do know that there's complications with kids, getting early onset osteoporosis. We're not going to talk about that because we haven't done a study and we don't fucking know. Okay. So anyways, here's what we're going to do. Your child that thinks that they're the opposite sex and that wants to commit suicide, we are going to inject them with massive cross-sex hormones to somebody that already is suicidal. And that's, it's fun stuff. And in the end, guys, all the studies that said that it helped mental illness for kids, all been retracted or taken away. But with that being said, we also don't know what the fuck is going to happen to your child's health in the future. We don't have a fucking clue. But we're going to have you sign this right here because your kid's going to commit suicide if you don't do mass cross hormones. So sign right there. That's what they need to tell parents because that is the truth.
Do you know
Minus
where
the
that?
suicide bit.
Yeah, that whole claim that you got to medicalize these kids or they're going to commit suicide. Do you know what that's based on? Where did that come from?
There's no study, none, not one, not uno, none. The only study on suicide. Now they talk about there's studies of kids that say that they're transgender and they say that they're suicidal. They say that they're this, but there's never been any follow-up at all. And the way that it is projected, I mean, it reminds me of that court hearing, and I think I've said it before in South Dakota, where this reverend stood up and said that, if you don't allow these kids to medically transition, they're going to kill themselves, banged on the desk. You're going to carry the coffins of these transgender kids, kind of a thing. And I remember sitting back going, God, even though I know I don't want to carry a coffin. I mean, I was after that got to me so bad that I researched in South Dakota. There's never been a suicide of a child that was not able to medically train. Not one, nothing to stand, nothing at all. But we do have a 30-year study that tells us that, medical transition, the highest suicidal ideation is after medical transition, 7 to 10 years. When you get to that, infamous Aaron, stage where you're like, okay, I've got everything. I got the bottom, I got the synthetic hormones, I got the name change, I got the top, I got the this, I got the that, I got the this. And then you look in the mirror and go, well, this is a fucking thing. Happiness is an inside job. And that's when you get suicidal, really suicidal at that time. And you either come to grips with it and embrace it and, move on with it. But it's not before transition.
Yeah, that's not talked about in the community much. Yeah. I mean, I think you're right that most of us do at some point bottom out or peak or whatever word you want to use for that. I think it happens to most, if not all of us, at some point. And we suffer through that in silence because we don't know anyone else is going through that. And there's no support for that because anyone that serves the trans community is looking at that from the affirmation model and approach, and now that's the only legal way that they can do the work. So where is the help when we kind of bottom out and that bubble bursts and this ideology unravels for us? Where's the help for that? Because we're not even allowed to talk to each other about that because and so I think everyone experiences that thinking, well, that's just me that's happening to, not realizing it's actually happening at different stages in, for people, but it at some point it happens to all of us.
That brings up something that I just came into my mind. I remember about a month before I had my phalloplasty, I was seeing a therapist with my wife at the time. And I remember I told her, I said, I'm having a hard time with medical transitioning. I'm kind of at that place where I'm having a hard time. And I'll never forget what she said. It's to this day, I'm astounded. I mean, I'm in a different place. I think I would call her on it now, but she goes, well, you know what, Scott, you're such an attractive man and you've got so much karma or whatever, you know, you just make an absolutely just awesome man. So I don't understand why you're having a problem. And I told her I didn't know if I wanted to have a phalloplasty because there's not much information on it, but I was having second thoughts on it. And she goes, well, what's 6 months going to change? You already have the time off from work. What's 2 years going to change? You're going to get it anyways. You're going to have to. You're a man, kind of a thing. And looking back at that now, that pisses me off. It pisses me off that I actually probably spent in total with Dr. Crane about 4 minutes. And that every question that I had in that 4 minutes was, oh yeah, it's no big deal, no big deal. And I remember that there was a plastic surgeon that was working there, and my wife was obsessed with making sure that my chin didn't look too feminine because I had a pointed chin or whatever, and she wanted to get like a chin implant or something. And so the other, I didn't do it by the way, but the other surgeon walked in that officed Crane and said, "You're getting a phalloplasty?" And I go, "Yeah, but Crane said that I could do this at the same time." And this guy looked at Crane, and I should have just said at that moment, okay, something's wrong. Because I saw in that surgeon's eyes, like, you dumb motherfucker. This is one of the hardest surgeries with brain surgery, with, you know, heart. I mean, this is a terrible, hard, core, high complication surgery. And you're wanting me to come in and do a chin implant for you at the same time? Are you fucking nuts? That's what his eyes said to me. And I knew that when I walked out. But then every time I asked a question, he always was like, no big deal, no big deal, no big deal. Well, it is a big deal. You just gotta, you have to, you know, get away from Reddit. There has to be information out there, and there's not. So when you have a problem, when you get the 7 to 10 year, when you look and go, okay, happiness is an inside job, and look what I've done to my body, it hasn't helped anything. Of course you're suicidal at that point, but nobody's holding anybody accountable. Nobody's holding that therapist accountable. That therapist that talks to me should be held accountable. Dr. Crane should be held accountable. Everybody should be held accountable, but they're not. And they're not because transgender health is experimental and people can't wrap their hands around it. They think that attorneys are coming. Attorneys are not coming. They can't come because nobody's doing studies about it. There is no proof on anything. It's airy. You know, and until a law firm comes along that has integrity, that says, you know what, we're going to create a baseline for care. We're going to spend $10 million because you know what, kids are worth it. Once they do that, and they cannot do those little signatures anymore. Hey, by the way, trans health is experimental science because you can't do a fucking thing if I mess up. It's not going to stop.
Yeah.
Going back to the suicide, the study, I think, okay, so we know that gender dysphoria usually has a lot of other comorbidities, primarily depression and anxiety. What I've kind of assumed for quite a few years now with the whole trans suicide narrative is that for a lot of people with chronic mental health issues, dysphoria and the notion of transition, the notion of a fresh life, the notion of a blank slate, it would be incredibly appealing. So like if you suffer from chronic depression and then you learn about dysphoria, it's like this is a do-over. I can do this thing, I can transition. And then if that transition isn't accessible for whatever reason, which used to be, you know, most often the case back in the day, I think when people, it's very easy for somebody to put all their eggs in trans basket. And if that fails, then this already very mentally suffering person goes that final option, which is terrible. And I think activists have used that narrative to the trans advantage, when I think a lot of what's going on is you know, already people who are suffering seek trans as a solution. Obviously it's not the solution. And so I think those numbers are being co-opted in a very cruel way.
Yeah. There was a psychiatrist years
Yes.
ago that said to me, you could pretty much throw out the DSM and just call it all anxiety, because he said that at the root cause of most psychological problems is distress. It manifests in different ways. We attach it to different things and find different ways of trying to cope with it. And, what you see when people are recovering from various things, whether it's addiction or whatever else, when you take away that thing that they've been using to cope with their distress, it brings up that distress. And some people make the mistake of thinking, well, see, I did need that thing because without that thing, now I feel bad, rather than seeing that that thing was serving a purpose of covering over whatever it was that was going on for you that was causing that distress. And I think that's what we're seeing when we're talking very honestly about the trans experience. We're kind of partially we're bursting that bubble for people, right? Or we're threatening to burst that bubble for people. So what they're left with is the distress underneath that.
Okay. Yeah.
I think that's a wonderful example, Aaron. When I went to Aurora Treatment Center for Women the first time, the first weekend I was invited to leave. I was discharged because of my suicidal ideations, because they're like, your suicidal ideology is so high, you're causing distress to the other women. So we need to discharge you. And if we had any legal grounds whatsoever, we'd have you pink slipped. You are that suicidal. But you know the language well enough not to say the things that we need to hear to have you committed against your will. So we're discharging you, but we're telling you, you are in danger. So what we can legally do is give you this information. This is what a support recovery house is for women. This is what you need to get a grip on in order to get admitted into one. And we're giving this information to your drug and alcohol counselor. You have an emergency appointment tomorrow morning to go in and see your drug and alcohol counselor. And this is what we're recommending for you. And that no saved my life. And that no also made it so that the women that I was sharing a room with in a drug and alcohol center had a better experience of their treatment. So saying no to someone who's suicidal can save their life. Yes, 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 is not, eventually somebody's going to say no. And I guess that's what we're talking about here at a point is AGPs who are hearing a no they have no foundation to stand on when that no happens, and the structure around them of their constructed femininity collapses because somebody calls them male or masculine or whatever. So no is therapeutic, right? And in the affirmations model, yes is the only therapeutic option, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very, very dangerous model. When COVID started, I was having a really hard time with coping. Being a truck driver is very isolating, and suddenly they closed down the restaurants. In BC, they closed down the convenience stores, so a lot of the truck stops closed down, and they closed down the rest areas as unnecessary. So there was a week in British Columbia where truck drivers were having a hard time finding a place to go to the bathroom because they closed everything down. But I reached out to a healthcare here in Saskatchewan, so I was hooked up with a phone call conversation, and she was talking to me about reaching out to like Zoom and stuff like that, and I was like, oh, well, I have a hard time with stuff like that. It's related to the sexual abuse that went on when I was a child, and we were filmed and made to watch and stuff like that. So it's hard for me. And she's like, "Oh, that's a trigger. That triggers you. Oh no, you can't do that at all." So rather than, what I needed was support to help me through that process. So the affirmations model that she gave me wasn't helpful. So at the end of that conversation, I was like, "Yeah, okay, I've gotten the help I needed, so I really don't need to talk to you again." So I was left reaching out to friends and relatives to help me get to a place where I'm comfortable being online, seeing my picture in the corner. I'm okay with realizing that, this is a recording process. I couldn't get professional help to help me through that. I had to reach out to family and friends saying, "Okay, I realize I need connection, and this is how connection is happening in the COVID reality with everything locking down. Can you help me through getting to a place where I can connect to people again?" So, yeah.
It's really not fair. I mean, I don't want to create a whole mental health crisis by just, bursting the bubble, like, for people, and then they spiral into a mental health crisis. I mean, I don't want to be responsible for that, but it's not really fair to the rest of us that we're not allowed to just talk reality about our own trans experience because, you're being transphobic, or you're gonna harm other people. I mean, how is that mentally healthy for us to say, well, no, you just need to live within that bubble or shut up about your experience? Like, how are we supposed to actually work this stuff out and develop a firm foundation under our feet, and mental health in the weirdness of this whole trans experience, if we're not allowed to kind of talk reality about this? That's not fair. That's not fair to the rest of us.
It's an impossible
Exactly.
combination of people and experiences that can't coexist to simultaneously, because they're kind of okay. You going back, you said that there was that joke that you could just throw out the entire DSM and call it anxiety. But you and I were talking about the fact that the different types of dysphoria, and how the majority could be considered basically a form of social anxiety, or like a developmental anxiety that's either about oftentimes childhood sexual abuse is a serious cause of dysphoria. Obviously, internalized homophobia, getting that external, negative feedback. These are anxieties these are social anxieties essentially that develop around, and then dysphoria or transition is seen as the solution to that anxiety. AGP is the only one that is not anxiety related. Obviously, bursting the bubble, that's a severe anxiety inducer, but the actual cause, the root cause, is not anxiety, it's orientation, and that's the only one that isn't rooted in anxiety. And the only way to properly treat people and to help people, give them the resources and the mental health care that they need, is to tear this apart, to not conflate them any longer. But yeah, we're gonna get that pushback because we're bursting a bubble, as you said.
We're bursting an industry.
Yeah.
I really feel, I mean, the majority of kids that, when I was doing this work clinically, the majority of kids that I was seeing were awesome kids, right? I mean, they're young, they're naive, they're still trying to figure this out. And, most of them, they just want to transition and get on with their lives and be, decent people. And they're the ones that I feel like we're doing this for, right? Because this is what they're inheriting, is this mess of a community and the pushback, and there's going to be growing pushback. This is just the beginning, especially in North America. They're a little further ahead than we are in Europe. This is just the beginning of how ugly this is going to get. And this is what the kids are inheriting. And I don't want 12-year-olds inheriting this. This is the adults' mess. And we're the ones that need to clean this up, not the kids. And so it hurts. And, some of that pushback of people who they're just oblivious to what's happening, right? They're They're oblivious to this internal fight that's been going on in the trans community for decades. They're oblivious to how this whole industry has evolved and changed over the last 20 years or so, and they're oblivious to the backlash that's coming and what that backlash is really about. And they're not understanding that we're trying to get ahead of that curve to protect these kids. So it does hurt, when you get dads on Twitter or whatever saying like, don't come after my trans kid, he's just a normal kid. It's like, yeah, I know he's just a normal kid, and that's exactly why we're doing this.
Yep.
100% agree.
That's when you know that you've got a parent who loves their child and has been sold the fear tactic that if my child is not allowed to do this, they will commit suicide, or they might commit suicide.
It's heartbreaking how many parents are in this boat. They are going to fight tooth and nail to confirm that they made the right choice. That because they were led down this. That's a really hard thing to consider.
I think the majority of trans people, even our age, like the majority are just, they've just integrated into society and they're living their lives kind of oblivious to all of this and oblivious that there's more than one trans community. We're in one trans community, and then there's this whole other trans community, and there's been this war between these two communities for a really long time, and the other community kind of took control of the trans narrative, roughly 20 years ago, and made this decision. This is how we're going to do things, right? We're using this queer theory way of thinking about things, not realizing that there's, and I don't know exactly how the numbers break down, if it's 50-50 or what this looks like in terms of numbers, because it's hard to count us because we're just scattered all across the world and just living our lives. And most people probably don't even know that they're trans, right? So I don't know how we count them, but I think that they're the majority. When I think back,
Who are the majority?
I think so. Like if you count all the people that are just out there living their lives, and they have no idea that any of this is even going on because they're just working and raising kids or whatever they're doing, right? I don't think they necessarily know that all of this has happened. Like when I think back to my cohort of people who are transitioning around the same time I did, because when at the beginning of my transition, I was more involved in community services and supports because I needed to be, right? I needed that support. I needed the medicalization and, well, didn't necessarily need the medicalization, but I was involved in the services at that time. And so I had a lot more contact with the whole trans community at that time. And thinking about that cohort, I would say it only ended up being a very tiny percentage of us that kind of stayed connected to a community and had some an invested interest in staying a part of the community and helping to direct the direction. So if that's kind of a gauge for percentages, the majority of us left and just got on with our lives.
I think that was probably the case, but suddenly over the last 5 years, the explosion in the news and media, trans this, it's kind of taken over. I think that piques people's interest. People who transitioned 10, 20, 30 years ago, who are cluing in, probably going, what happened? Like why are we suddenly all over the news? And then you start looking a little closer and realizing that that just kind of how haywire things have gone. I know for me, I transitioned 10 years ago. I just sort of just lived as a man, just kind of did my thing for 7 years. And then in 2017 is when I got wind of the mass increase in numbers. Mm-hmm. And that's, and I think stories like ours, like all four of us here are kind of, can be kind of microcosms of what's happening in the broader trans community, the broader trans experience is those of us who just sort of got the help we needed at the time, moved on with our lives. And now we're here and or is my perspective skewed because I just got so tucked into the trans debate? Well, that's another thing I want to say is that when I transitioned, learned that I had dysphoria, or that's what we call it, right? And I assumed that what I experienced the gender dysphoria was what everybody experienced the gender dysphoria. I thought it was one thing. The entire world seems to also think it is one thing, and that's what we need to bust up. But
Yes.
when I I thought that what I had is what all trans people had, that feeling. And so when I saw the explosion and I started looking into it and reading other people's experiences, I realized these are very, very, very different experiences that we're all calling the same thing.
Mhm.
And so I don't know if other people who've lived their lives outside of the trans discourse have had similar experiences where they get wind of this and then maybe start digging a little deeper and finding out the way that things are for trans women versus trans men, and then all the different experiences therein as well. I don't. So again, I could be because I got very curious and I started digging in. So I'm assuming other people did similarly, but I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, and reflecting back on my experience, and I don't know if this was your experience, Kenneth, too. And I name you just because we transitioned around the same time and in the same community and attended many of the same conferences. Is looking back, it really kind of one of the things that strikes me and saddens me is, despite the fact that I've been to tons of conferences, I've interacted with hundreds, if not thousands, of other trans people, mostly trans men, over the years, and online forums and support groups, and it's rare to really have a conversation like this where we just talk honestly about some of our motivations and what was going on for us at the time and what was this like for us as a child. Because if you want to stay in the community and keep going to those conferences and keep going to those groups and be a service provider in the community, you learn pretty quickly not to say certain things, right? Including, what was this experience like for you? Because exactly what you're saying, Aaron, is that it's so different for each of us. And this whole thing unravels really quickly when you get people to start talking honestly about what was actually going on for them and why they did this. So you get little sound bites of it. I mean, I've heard people say, oh, well, I lied to my clinician, and said, I just learned the script from talking to my buddies, and I just went in and lied because I knew what they were going to talk about, or so you hear all these little sound bits, but people are really, really guarded about opening up about what was really going on for them. Why did they transition? Why did you lie? Like, if you didn't have actual gender dysphoria, yeah, and you felt like you needed to lie to get this treatment. Well, why did you want to transition then? Right. And so it's really hard to get people to open up about those things. Right. And, I don't know if that's been your experience, Kenneth, as well, like attending conferences and stuff, that to actually hear somebody's just narrative of someone's just raw experience of this, that's really, other than in small groups, like you sort of find your people, your friends. So the conversation we're having now isn't unusual in somebody's basement rec room where they're around the coffee table, or that's not unusual. Once you find your people and you feel safe to open up, then that stuff comes out, but it never comes out in the community or in public. And I think that's what we're doing something so different here, is these conversations that are normal for us to have amongst friends, we're making that public for the first time. And now people are saying, like, oh my God, like there's this pocket of the trans community and this pocket of the trans community. It's not all one community, and we don't all think the same, and we haven't had all the same kind of gender dysphoria. I think that's kind of blowing people's minds because they haven't been exposed to these kinds of conversations ever.
Yeah, for me, it was being invited to remain silent. Like, you have male privilege, so we're amplifying women's voices. I've heard that so many times. And the other experience was, especially like in the 2 peer support groups I was required to attend, those who had a different narrative, like people would take me aside afterwards, especially the trans women, and explain the danger of my narrative, and that you can't You know, this is what you need to tell your doctor to get what you want. You can't tell your truth. You can't talk about this is the narrative you need to, right? Like I was corrected on my narrative of
Mhm.
why I wanted to transition. You know, you can't tell your doctor that your only motivation is A and B because of C. And do not talk to Dr. Blanchard about your history of sexual abuse. Don't ever, ever, ever. When you go for your surgery approval, like we used to have to get the paper from Blanchard and Gail, is it Knutson? Dr. Knutson was the other psychiatrist. Is that,
Yeah.
am I
Yeah.
pronouncing her?
I don't know how
want
it's
to,
pronounced, but yeah, I know
yeah,
who you're talking
yeah.
about.
Do not mention, because you will not get approved, right? You have a lived history of sexual abuse. So if you mention that, you will not get approved. Well, I mentioned it and I got approved, you know? So yeah, there was very much, the men were telling me what to do. Like the trans women were,
See you,
and
Oh,
Scott.
you got to head out, Scott.
I gotta go. Bye,
Thanks,
guys.
Scott. Talk to you
Okay,
again
man.
soon.
okay, thanks, Scott. I appreciate your input and thank you so much.
We've done such a disservice to each other by teaching each other, and I mean, I hope that I've never done that, but it's commonplace, right? That we in the community, people kind of tell each other these tips about say this and don't say this, and we've done each other such a disservice by doing that, because the message maybe should be like, maybe do some work around your sexual trauma before deciding to transition. Like that might have been a safer, kinder, more responsible thing to tell people in the community, rather than, hey, lie about that and get your hormones.
Awesome, Aaron, because you know what? Dr. Blanchard and Dr. Knutson said, you have obviously done your work in my assessment. That's what the professional psychiatrist said. What the trans peers were telling me was shut the fuck up and hide this shit. The professionals said, you've done your work. You know, at that time I'd had almost a year of inpatient alcohol and drug treatment. I had attended the top sexual abuse trauma um, treatment group in the area at Pacifica Treatment Center. I'd had 2 years of alcohol and drug counseling, and they're like, "Yeah, you did what you know. You've got your grounding as far as your sexual abuse is concerned. We're not concerned about that in your transition process." So yeah, and everybody was telling me to shut the fuck up about the sexual abuse history, and I've listened to some of the YouTube stuff, and I made the decision to talk about it. So yeah, I'm consciously talking about I have a history of childhood sexual abuse. So yeah, and exactly what you're saying is, it's doing a disservice to require people to hide their lived history, because their lived history might endanger your narrative, or being an autoguided felic where transitioning is part of your sexual orientation. You know, then yeah.
I when I got wind of this, or yeah, about 3 years ago or 4 years ago now, and I started spending a lot of time in FTM online communities. Just the one thing that was the most common experience is childhood sexual abuse, and
Yeah.
it's like it makes so much sense why dysphoria would result, and it's just fucking criminal that we don't talk about this. Yeah, but and why that isn't why that hasn't ever been considered in the clinical work around gender dysphoria. Wow,
Mhm.
yeah, it just doesn't. It boggles my mind. But yeah, it's heartbreakingly common, and but also you know perfect makes perfect sense why that exists, why that would happen, why dysphoria would develop from it. That is, or why. One thing that I've also realized while spending a lot of time kind of looking into each different type of dysphoria and between males and females, and pretty much across the board, male motivation is it's sexually driven in basically seeking female sexual objectification. Um, that's a cruel way to put it, but it's a general trend I've seen. And the opposite in the female direction is fleeing female sexual objectification, and
Mhm.
why this is
Okay.
glossed over and not. Um, Obviously, dysphoria is very complex and affects people differently, but mass trends, that seems to be a case. It's very sexually motivated in males, very socially motivated in females, but a significant driver seems to seek protection under a veil of male. Is on
Mhm.
the female transition side. Um, why the fuck this isn't talked about is beyond me.
Oh, it's criminal, and the silencing of it within the trans community needs to stop. And Morgane Auger does not have a right to silence my history because it's inconvenient to her narrative. And it's my gender identity, my sexual orientation are protected under the Canadian Human Rights Code. And I am a trans man and I was born a woman, and my sex will always be woman. And my gender orientation at this point is I am most comfortable with having a masculine social gender presentation. The definition of gender identity and expression in Canada is it's about what's going on the inside and the outside. It's not biological in my understanding. It's physiological, or it's emotional, and the physical, what's physically reflected. So I say my gender identity is I am most comfortable with a masculinized social gender presentation. I was born a girl. I will die a woman. And that is my stance on that matter. So let her discriminate against me because of my gender identity. And we'll go gender identity to gender identity.